Good morning, you guys, afternoon, evening. Today we're going to be building what I consider to be a very typical retaining wall, and that is a gravity retaining wall that's under 4 foot in height. This is one of the most common retaining walls that you'll probably be building in your own backyard, and we're going to be doing this thing from start to finish with you guys today. We're going to be teaching you the techniques that we use on our commercial sites that we also have adopted to use in our residential sites. I'm gonna be hanging out in the corner down here and just walking you through all of the details. So this is gonna be kind of like a knowledge bomb drop on you guys today, because I'm just gonna be feeding you a ton of information on how we build these things so that when you go out to build your own, you can do it without worrying. So the first thing that we're looking at right here is the excavation. This is a pretty important part of the retaining wall process, especially on a gravity retaining wall. And let's just talk a little bit about a gravity retaining wall. What we consider a gravity retaining wall is any retaining wall that is not geogrid reinforced, meaning it has no geogrid, requires no engineering, should not require any special permitting, but you should check your local area to make sure that you don't need permitting. Now we're digging the base out right here, and let me just tell you, I'm going to give you 2 rules of thumb when you're doing your base. 1 foot, that's the first rule of thumb. The second rule of thumb is 2 foot. Let me clarify. If you're building a retaining wall on a flat level surface like you see us doing right here, it's 1 foot. You dig down 1 foot below grade. And what that gives you is that gives you 6 inches for rock and 6 inches for base. So you're completely burying one course of base, and that's no matter what. I don't care how big or how small, you always got to have at least 1 course of base buried, simply because you got to have the wall toed in. And what toed in, like toe like your big toe, toed in basically means is that you've got enough of it below grade. So if this is the grade, you've got enough of the wall below grade that it can resist movement. If you have your wall at grade or partially above grade, it's not going to resist movement as well. The second thing that we said, there's one of 2 ways scenarios, is if you're on a slope. So if you're putting a wall in on a slope, 1 foot is not going to be enough, because it only gives you 6 inches of rock, and you always have 6 inches of rock. That number does not change. All right, now I'm going to jump in here because I just gave you a very hard and fast rule, but I really want to clarify a few things with it. You look at this wall behind me. This is about 6-7 foot tall, and I've built walls 20 to 30 foot tall on 6 inches of rock. But there is an exception to that rule, and as we look out at that swamp, that's the exception to the rule. If you have soft or questionable soils that you may not feel comfortable with, 6 inches of rock may not be enough. 6 inches is a great minimum requirement for every retaining wall, even if it's just a 1 foot tall retaining wall. 6 inches of rock. Don't ever cheat on that number. And you can still build a wall 10 foot tall on 6 inches of rock as long as your subsoil is good. But if it's soft or questionable, you may need to add more rock. 1 foot of rock, or even 2 foot of rock if it's really bad soils, and then you bridge it and you can layer grid into the base. You can actually put geogrid into the base of your retaining wall. It works phenomenal to bridge. So if you got a soft, spongy spot when you're digging out your base, you're like, oh my God, what do I do with this? Dig out the nasty soil, put in extra rock. If you put in 1 foot of rock or even 2 foot of rock, slap a layer of grid into that rock, sandwich it in there and pack it down, and you should be good. But use some common sense when you do these things. And if you're really worried about your soil conditions, you best get a geotechnical engineer involved and a retaining wall engineer to verify these things for you. And now there is another rule that we got to talk about, and that is how much block do you bury? It's not the same on flat level ground as it is on a slope. So let's find out what we got to do if we're going to be building a wall on a slope. And you'll only have 6 inches of block buried, but on a slope you need to have 2 feet, or you need to have 2 courses to 3 to sometimes 4 courses of block. It depends on how steep of a slope. The steeper your slope, the more courses of block you need buried. A 1-to-1 is super steep. 2-to-1 is not quite as steep. 2-to-1 is difficult to walk on, and a 3-to-1 you can walk on, you can mow, but it's still not comfortable. So let's just say you have a 3-to-1 slope in your backyard. You're gonna wanna bury a minimum of 2 courses. So when you're cutting your grade, you have to add enough of depth of cut for your footing for 6 inches of rock and 1 foot or 2 courses of block, meaning your subgrade will be cut 18 inches. Now, if you go to a 2-to-1 slope, this is 3-to-1. If you go to 2-to-1, so a steeper slope, you may want to err on the side of being more cautious and putting in 3 courses of block below grade, because you want to have enough of that wall towed in to resist the movement, okay? Technically it would look like that. I don't know why I'm showing you with my arms, but it seems to work. Now, the material we use, now here's one of the big mistakes companies make, is using the wrong material as base. And there's a number of different options you can use. You can use class 5, which is 3/4 inch rock with all the way down to fines. If you use class 5, you have to pack that base really tight. We don't use class 5. What we use is 3/4 clear, and we're gonna show you that in just a minute, okay? But the reason we use 3/4 clear, it is a little bit more expensive, but it resists movement. So when water flows through that 3/4 clear material, it's not going to wash away the fines. Now, some people have said, well, that's just a trap for water. And yes, it can be a trap for water, but to this day, we've never had that be an issue. But what we have found is that 3/4 clear rock, so it's just, there's no fines in it, it's just very clear angular stone. It locks into place and it resists movement. So it resists frost heaving, it resists hydraulic washing below it. And what we do is we don't have to worry about packing it so tight when we use the right rock, because we can just put it in and then hit it with a 150-pound plate packer, and that just clenches everything together. It's a lot like sand, okay? One of the things that I do want to point out in this video is the base and the base prep. And Alex is going to teach Jason how to base here in just a little bit. But when we're building our retaining walls, we typically have one guy as the dedicated baser. You don't want to switch this out and have 2 or 3 different guys basing, because 2 people, although they should base identical, they never do. And so you have one dedicated baser, and then if you do switch it and have somebody else take over, you've got to have one person that double checks everything. And one of the things you need to know about base is it will take one guy as long to base as it'll take another guy to set the second and third courses, because basing is the most time-consuming part of this entire project. So getting that base right ultimately tells you how well your wall is going to perform. It is probably one of the most important components of the retaining wall build itself that you can absolutely master. And you're gonna need 2 different levels when you base. You want a short level, and then you're gonna want a 4-foot level, okay? And the reason you wanna do that is you've gotta base the block individually so it's perfectly level, side to side, front to back. And then that block has to be perfectly level with the next block over, side to side, front to back. So these 2 blocks have to marry together as if they are one solid piece. But here's where you need the longer level. When you get to your 3rd block, you got 1, 2, 3rd block. That's got to marry with the 2nd block, but it also has to marry with the 1st block. So you need that longer level to string all the way over. And this is an important step that a lot of companies and a lot of people miss. And the reason you want that super long level to make sure that you've got at least 3 courses all married together is because you can get the block slightly off, just teeny bit off, and your next block might be a teeny bit off. And what happens is when you've got 100 feet or 200 feet, your one end of your wall is going to be at a completely different elevation as the other end of your wall. And in some cases, that won't matter if it's in your own backyard. But in other cases, that could be the difference of you having to pull out the retaining wall and redo it, or moving on again. The techniques I'm teaching you are the same whether it's residential or commercial. And here is the actual rock that we use, and I'm gonna let Alex describe what's happening here next.
All right, so we got the end of the wall coming up here. It's gonna wrap around there. I already got the base marked out. See this line here came out right there and crossed right through the center of our wall. You can actually see right there going out. So we got that relocated up out of our way. The electrician's here. Relocated the wire for us. He dug himself a trench and bored it under this concrete sidewalk here. Make it so that our wall could come that way. And it's just gonna die in right there with the concrete edges, and we'll saw cut whatever we have to just to make it blend nice there and make a nice edge and corner there.
Wait. This is an important detail that Alex didn't even mention. He just kind of glossed it over, and he's showing us what he's doing, but he's not telling us why he's doing it. There was a utility line that would have been directly below our retaining wall, but you can never base your retaining wall on a utility line. I don't care if it's a power line. It's worse if it's a water line. If those utilities ever fail, your retaining wall fails. And sometimes what can happen, you know what? No. We're gonna show you. And this, my friends, is why you don't build your wall over the top of anybody else's work. You see that hole in the ground right there? Well, that hole, ouch, doesn't end. This hole in my yard is where the sanitary sewer that the city installed has failed and washed out. And if I build a retaining wall, or if I had built a retaining wall over this area, and this has been fine for the last 15 years, but this year it just washed out. And if I had built my retaining wall over the top of this, when this failed, even though my wall could have been perfectly fine, it would have failed along with it. Don't ever build your retaining wall over anybody else's work unless you're willing to own their work along with your own. And I'm not willing to do that.
Yep, coming along here. This is top of wall. Just gonna step up into the hill there and die off wherever grade be. Of course, they had to come in here and paint the sidewalks white yesterday, so we can't run our equipment over it. We got to drive down and around to get to our equipment over here. I'll kind of go at an angle across this block, and then same there. Okay. Once in the middle. Okay. It was teetering on one, so you hit that corner down, this one come up, you know, you're just playing the game.
Tic-tac-toe.
Let's talk about what defines what a gravity wall is. Now in this case, a gravity wall in Minnesota, we've got to talk about this, is any wall under 4 foot tall that does not have a surcharge on it. And a surcharge can be defined as the weight from a structure, such as a building, a driveway, a garage pad, anything like that, or a hill. So this is your retaining wall. If you have a hill, and even if this wall is 4 foot, you got a hill that you could end up needing geogrid. We've built plenty of 4 foot and under retaining walls with grid because the weight of the hill itself puts pressure on the wall that requires reinforcement.
That looks better. I'll hand you another block.
Actually, before we go on, we probably want to dig the rest of that out. That way we don't get dirt and gravel.
Yeah, do we got enough room for one more block? I guess it's tight.
It's tight.
Right. Let me kind of here.
Now what the guys are digging out right here is called a step up. So very rare will you have the base of your retaining wall be completely flat and level and just perfectly fine. It just doesn't work out that way. A lot of times the base will go up or down. Well, technically, if it's going one way or another, it's going up and down. Now, if you are going to be building a retaining wall on a slope where the hill itself slopes, not the front of it, but just the length of the wall slopes, if this is your wall, and it's built on a slope, you always want to start at the lowest point of the wall. It's easier to do step ups with block, where you lay one block on top of another block, than it is to try to do a step down where you tuck a block underneath the block below it. It's just a faster, easier process. And Alex has actually got this based and prepped out and ready for a step up. So if you look right here, you can see where the block ends. If this is the block, then he fills up the gap with rock so that the rock for the step up goes flush with the top of the block. And what that allows him to do is to take another block and put it on the rock and put it on the block and bridge these two equally. And you're gonna see these guys do that in just a minute. And every single step up then is built the same. We use rock, we use the block, and we bridge them together. Okay, so one of the things, if you are going to be building a curved retaining wall, you'll see that it's called a running bond. And that is where where two blocks meet, they have another block completely underneath the two. So these two blocks butt heads, and another block goes equally over both of the blocks below it. And that's keeping your running bond on. Now with these blocks, as we pin them,
the way of smacking them over like that all day long.
Yeah.
Some radiuses are so tight.
You gotta be really careful.
Get a pinch point.
Yep.
you don't need to necessarily have your running bond absolutely true, dividing the block below it. Your running bond can be slightly off.
Yeah, I bet a pin would drop in there.
Sure will.
Yep, because now we're gonna have to pin them in those other ones. This is the true radius there. That one just got a little canter to it.
Now, you want to give that a good love tap at the very end and bring these tight?
Well, see what happens when we start smacking it like that is when we have these radiuses, they're so tight together, it starts chipping these corners off.
Oh.
So we don't want to smack them too much. We can smack them a little bit,
Right.
but we want to be careful not to damage them.
Okay.
You know, so
I get it.
sliding them over is going to be the best bet. If you got to tap it, you got to tap it, but we don't want to damage the bevels.
Right.
All right, so one of the things that we didn't talk about was the backfill, and how do you backfill a gravity retaining wall? Well, you backfill it with your drainage aggregate. Now, the minimum that you're going to want to put your drainage aggregate in is 12 inches behind that block. But don't skimp out on this. This is where a lot of guys skimp out on this. And what they're doing is they're stepping over $1 to pick up a dime. Meaning they're shorting themselves on this job. They're putting a little bit extra money in their own pocket for the temporary.
Yeah.
Just on the radiuses, they're so tight.
You gotta be really careful.
Get a pinch point.
Yep. Yep.
Might even base one more out since I got the rock in there for it.
$200 pins going down the hatch.
25 cents a pin.
Is that their cost is?
Yeah. They might even be more like 30 cents because the box of 500 of them is like 140 bucks.
Yeah.
But you can do the math.
That's like 37 cents a piece.
I'm gonna get the calculator out and check you. So good job, math.
Contractors cut critical corners, and they don't need to. It's just the stupidest thing I've ever seen. You add extra materials in. You take the work above and beyond what the bare minimum requirements are, because those bare minimum requirements are designed to build you a lasting retaining wall. But when you go above and beyond that, you as a contractor take any worry about this retaining wall off. Because here's the thing, in Minnesota, if you build a crappy retaining wall and you don't build it right, even if you have not given a warranty, you're still on the hook, because you can't build things wrong. Build it correct, but build it above and beyond. So 12 inches minimum drainage aggregate means 12 inches minimum. I have zero issue going 2 feet with drainage aggregate. I've gone 3 feet. All right, guys, we've got the retaining wall all wrapped up, and some of the details that I'd like you to notice is we've got a curved retaining wall with multiple curves going on, and basically that means all of these caps have to be cut to fit. So this is not a standard cap. This is a standard cap. So as we go through these radius and corners, you're going to have to take that into account, and that's going to add time and complexity to your project. And if you make these radiuses too tight, not only will you be cutting the caps, but you could also potentially be cutting the retaining wall blocks themselves. So as we look at this radius right here with the Versalock unit, as you make the radius, it's okay to get off on your running bond. And if you're worried about that, I have a training video out there. I'm going to tell you to go reference that. So if your running bond doesn't stay perfectly centered, it is not the end of the world. These blocks are designed to allow you to compensate for tighter turns and radiuses. But if you get too tight, then you're cutting the blocks just like you're cutting the caps. So as we look at these caps, you can see that they're tight. There is no spacing. So a lot of blocks, you'll have it'll widen out. I mean, on a lot of caps, and it just doesn't look finished, in my opinion, my 2 cents. I don't like that look. I think it's unprofessional, and I think having your caps tight, having your retaining wall blocks tight, all of the little details that we showed you to make sure that everything looks good, just adds to a really nice finished product, even if it's in a spot that maybe doesn't get the highest visibility. But that's all we got for you on today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed this process, and we will catch you guys on another one. God bless. Go get them, you guys.